Offord. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
So we are doing a show here on Off-MLS, whisper listings, pocket listings. Jim, can you describe what a regular listing is, a residential real estate listing, on the multiple listing service, what that is, and then how we go to the Off-MLS?
So a regular listing is a listing an agent takes from a seller, and he logs into our multiple listing service platform, loads up the pictures, adds the romance, adds all the public record data that's automatically uploaded from property tax records, public records, and then picks the choices on how he's going to advertise that property, because we provide that facility in the system, and hits submit, and it's in the database, and it hits hot sheets, and everybody's notified that there's a new listing on the marketplace. It gets into automated emails that realtors have set up for their clients to receive alerts when there's new listings, and so it starts in 15 minutes. It starts getting syndicated to the internet, to the portals like Realtor.com and Zillow and Trulia and Homes.com, and to broker and agent websites. And so that's the listing that's legitimately on the market, that's got full exposure and full disclosure that it's available to sell. An off-MLS property is one that's been taken by an agent, and generally there's still a listing agreement on that. You would expect to have a listing agreement in order to market somebody else's property, but it's not in the platform, and so the exposure for that property is greatly reduced, because only those people that drive down the road and see the coming soon sign know about it.
Now, we spoke about, we're skipping ahead here, but we've had you on the show before about this Off-MLS, that during the Great Recession, 2008, my little homemade chart here, we had how many listings were on your MLS?
2008, we peaked out at about 18,000 listings.
Okay.
And that was the peak of our inventory. Started declining after that due to a lot of other factors in the marketplace. And there was very little, I'm sure there was off-market transactions happening, but it wasn't hitting anybody's radar. The volume was pretty low. And 2013, our inventory was at 6,000 to 8,000 listings for 5 counties. And the off-MLS activity peaked at over 27% of transactions.
Wow. Simon, you were very active in the real estate community. You work with a lot of realtors, real estate boards. Can you speak to how this plays out for the real estate professional and their sellers?
Well, it's all a risk analysis. So in any of these transactions, you're looking at a risk for the realtors, because you're putting your clients in a potential place of risk. And so how are the clients being put in a place of risk? Well, it goes down to market exposure, like we talked about. And so if you're not putting it on the MLS, you're risking not getting out to the market to all those potential buyers. And so as a realtor, you're looking to get in trouble, because then when your client gets upset when they find out from their neighbor, or they go on Redfin or Zillow and see that their neighbor sold the property for $250,000 more, they're all of a sudden looking at the realtor and saying, what happened? Where's my extra $250,000? So you're seeing both sides get in trouble, and it's not a good situation for anyone.
Now, for a condo townhouse, that could be an extra $25,000, $50,000, or $75,000.
Absolutely, or more.
It's still serious money.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, we talked about the differences of having it on a computer, just for fun. We have had you on the show before, and we talked about nowadays with the internet. When I started, it was just a multiple listing service.
Right.
In fact, they had the book, right?
Yep.
And then it came to the individual terminals, and now we had the computers, and it was for the realtors. And then it started to go to different websites on the World Wide Web, right? Now, how many websites would a property go on now?
Well, so we have a product called ListHub, which is a listing syndication tool that has close to 300 destinations in it, and then we have 350 third-party vendors that get data from us. And so when a listing goes into the system, the broker and the agent have a choice of setting it up so that it goes to the ListHub syndication choices. It goes directly to the big portals like Realtor.com and Zillow and Trulia, and goes out to these third-party vendors that create websites for brokers, agents, franchisors, and third-party products that make widgets that realtors subscribe to for their tool set. But in addition to that exposure, we data share with other MLSs, and so There are over 100,000 realtors in the state of California with clients that see the listings that are put into our MLS system because they're replicated into their system.
Wow.
And so that all that exposure is lost.
Okay, so for the person concerned about property, because there is legitimate concerns, right, Simon, about somebody that might not want to have their home on the market.
Right. There are certain instances where you have maybe a celebrity, someone with some extreme wealth, a judge, a prosecutor, something like that, where privacy does matter. In those situations, I can understand it, but then the key is that there's informed consent and that the actual client understands what they're getting into
right.
and why there's disadvantages for not listing on MLS. And if they make that informed decision, then so be it. That's their decision. And there are times, but the times aren't equal to the actual percentages that we're seeing.
Okay, that's a good point, because when we are setting the stage here that for a licensee to take a listing, an employment contract with a seller, they have 90 days to sell the house, for instance. They could put a sign on the lawn. They could put, or no sign on the lawn. They could have a lockbox on the porch or no lockbox. They could do appointment only. Oftentimes, you know, in the more expensive homes, it might be appointment only with the listing agent.
Right.
Right? And then in your MLS, when the realtor puts it on the MLS, they could click the button to have it share with other companies, click another button to have the multiple listings, listing hub, and so on. They could build
Exactly.
the exposure, correct?
Correct.
Now, in addition to that, pictures. People are concerned, I don't want a bunch of pictures of my house. Do they need a picture?
We require one picture, except in the coming soon status. We don't require a picture in the
Okay.
coming soon status. But
Okay.
in the and we can support up to 120 pictures on a property, but you only have to put in one.
Okay, now let's speak about the coming soon, because as a licensee, as a realtor, we agree to put our properties on the market and share it with other realtors and licensees. Now, if we don't share, isn't there some sort of disclaimer or some sort of
Well, so if you
form?
don't, if you're not going to list the property in the MLS system, you need to have a form signed by the seller that says they don't want the property in the MLS system. If they put it in our coming soon status, it doesn't go onto the internet. It just stays in the listing management platform, but it is visible by the other subscribers to our service.
Okay. So when this first came out, there was a form, a paper form, and I would have a seller sign it with wet ink at their kitchen table. And then I'd fax it to your MLS.
Right.
So now, after the task force, we had a task force a few years ago. In all fairness, I was on that. I was in on the conference calls. And the conclusion was that coming soon status on your MLS.
Correct. So that was one of the conclusions, was to have a coming soon status, but to take the concerns that people had about putting the listing on the market too soon. The days on market don't count when it's in that status. It can be in that status for 30 days. And it's not going to the internet. It's pretty much staying private just among the other subscribers to the service.
Okay. Now, Simon, we spoke about before, you talked about the DocuSign. Now there's electronic signatures. I'm not a big fan of it. I know you're not too happy with it, but the same form that it used to be with wet ink on the kitchen table is now done online.
Right.
And you had mentioned in the past about realtors, agents are now sending a stack of documents online to a seller. And how does that appear on their smartphone or pad, by the way?
Well, the problem
show
is that you get hundreds of pages of documents in these real estate transactions. Understandably, some are probably more important than others. This form about excluding the property from the MLS is a pretty important form.
Yeah.
But when it's buried in 100 other pages of documents, and you're flipping through it on your phone that's 2 inches by 4 inches wide, you're not reading that thing.
Right. No.
And I know from realtors that they send those things out, and the DocuSign enables them to get back the forms within minutes, essentially.
Yes.
And there's no way possible, it's not possible for those clients to actually be reading all the forms, and that's scary for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's specifically going to your realtor's office and sitting down with them and reading through the forms and understanding what you're signing, or taking some other action more than just flipping through the DocuSign program and hitting little check boxes, because that's all it takes. You have either initials or actual signatures, and you can literally click a box and you can sign each one. And if you're not reading it, then you're really not learning what you need to know before you enter into these transactions.
And that is really that particular software is for speed.
Right.
And convenience.
Exactly.
It's not to learn about the transaction.
And there's benefits of speed and convenience, but there's also disadvantages, and one of them is not reading the forms.
Now, Jim, in terms of, we'll get back to Simon on the disadvantages for a seller, but what are some of the problems with off-MLS for the general public?
Well, so if the data is not in our platform,
Yes.
when an agent's taking a listing and he needs to do a listing presentation, he needs to look the property up and look up the comps to see what the property's worth, it's missing data, missing transactions that happened off the MLS. And so when an agent's doing a CMA and trying to determine the comparative market value of a property's missing the transactions that happened off the MLS. And so over time, we get a larger and larger hole of transactional data that makes it more difficult for real estate agents to service their buyer and seller clients because the data's not there to do their job. Creates the same kind of problem for appraisers too, because they're trying to determine what a home is worth, and there's transactions that happened outside the MLS that actually could help or could hurt the value of that property depending on what they were sold for. And so there's a breakdown in trust. And we're in an industry that's built on cooperation, collaboration, and compensation, and so that gets broken down. And the whole value proposition for the multiple listing service and for organized real estate in general is compromised by this practice.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The Realtor Code of Ethics is 100 years old now.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to be sharing this information and cooperating with one another. The other one was, you mentioned before about possibly steering. If I have a off-MLS listing and I'm a whisper listing, is really all about if I like that agent and I like their buyer, maybe I'll bring them into it. That could be a potential problem.
Yeah, again, you're limiting the market that the property is being exposed to, and there's also this outside risk of some sort of fair housing or discrimination lawsuit being brought on one of these cases. If someone feels that they weren't exposed or they didn't have a chance to purchase that property and it was motivated by discrimination, that could be a lawsuit right there as well, and that's something that is in the back of everyone's mind as a possible fear.
How does this, and if an agent is found to be wanting in their marketing of a property and did not put it on the multiple listing service, and by the way, the multiple listing service has a fantastic tool about open houses.
It does, yes.
And that
broker
was
tours.
used. That was very strong. By the way, nowadays, the broker tours, when I began in the business, it was just for brokers. But now we have common practice now.
We even have an app for broker tours called Theo. And so, it's more interactive, more real time, more robust. You can, so it's become quite the tool for people that want to use their product.
Okay, so that is really something in terms of, you have the broker tours online through the multiple listing service. The open houses, by the way, when the agent sets up the open houses Saturday, Sunday, it then goes to those websites that you spoke about, the 8,500 websites.
Right, a lot of those websites are getting open house
Bragging
data
about
from
it.
us.
Okay, so Simon, if a realtor is found to sell the house in-house or one-on-one, which 20% of the listings off MLS are sold by one agent?
Yes.
Okay, approximately. So how is that agent, for lack of a better term, punished if and when he or she gets caught?
Sure. Well, what we're talking about is dual agency, and dual agency has been a hot button topic in the courts for years. I can't tell you the number of cases where an agent was punished for being a dual agent, even though everything else seemed to be in line. The fact that they were a dual agent just made them look bad, and the judges don't like dual agents.
Oh, okay.
The facts of the case sometimes don't matter in those ones. The dual agent's going to get punished. And so what a dual agent is traditionally where you think of that one-to-one that you were talking about. One realtor represents both the buyer and the seller.
Yes.
However, dual agency has expanded, and there's actually a case that's up in the California Supreme Court right now, the Hariki case, that's looking at dual agency, because that case found that the fiduciary relationship that a dual agent has been expanded to not just the one-on-one type of agency situation, also anyone under that broker's license. So if you're in a firm with hundreds of realtors, real estate agents, And you might have never met the other agent on the other side, but because their license is under the same broker, that's considered a dual agent. And then that agent has a fiduciary duty to both parties in the transaction as opposed to just his or her client.
I see. So that's a good point. So for the, it's almost as if, as an attorney, you would never represent both sides of a dispute.
Absolutely not.
But it's perfectly legal in California for an agent to represent a buyer and a seller in the same transaction.
It's technically legal, yes, but there is a heightened duty. So again, if you have a fiduciary duty to your own client, the fiduciary duty is the highest duty under the law. Whereas you don't have that fiduciary duty to the principal on the other side. However, if you're a dual agent working under the same broker, then you do have that fiduciary duty to that other side.
Okay. Because we notice when it's off MLS, there, Jim, can you talk about some of the dollar figures here? I have these great graphs that we will put up on the air quarter by quarter.
Well, so last year there were $5 billion worth of real estate transactions that happened off the MLS.
Wow.
And what we see when we compare the stats using CoreLogic's tax database to our MLS database is that there's close to 20% in this last quarter that were sold off the MLS, and the median price, if you add my 5 core counties together, is about $850, and so that's that when it was sold in the MLS, and $187,500 less when it was sold off the MLS. Now, if you change those stats and you look at just Santa Clara County, it's a 20% price difference. You get 20% more for the property when you sell it through the MLS.
Wow,
because of the broadened exposure for the property.
That's incredible. So that's something, Simon, if a judge heard that in a courtroom with a dual agent, it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially a double whammy there. You've got A, you're off MLS, so you don't have the exposure. B, if you're double ending the deal and representing both sides, how can an agent possibly say to their client, this is the best price for the property to buy it for, when they're going into the other room and saying, this is the price to sell it for? You can't reconcile those two things. And so when you have that truly one-on-one dual agency, it's always going to get you in trouble when someone brings a claim.
Yeah, I've only done it 3 times in 30 years, and it was always in down markets, but I always joke it was 3 times the work, 4 times the responsibility, and 5 times the liability.
Absolutely on the liability, yeah.
Okay. Now, we talked about how we're going to be showing these graphs about the difference between the price ranges, county per county, and the medium. So we took a medium price range of the 5 counties, and then we did an average of those. In this first quarter, the last quarter of 2015 is 22% difference, and then the first quarter of 2016, 27% difference.
Right. So, and we seem to peak out on off-market activity at the first quarter of each year. It's when we always hit the peak for the year on the number of transactions happening off the MLS.
I think that's safe to say because the realtors just went through, the agents just went through the lean, mean fall and winter,
right,
and looking for some extra paychecks, right? And so if they could sell it themselves, so be it. So in terms of the sellers, Simon, do you have some advice for sellers when they're selling their property?
Absolutely. It's all about just understanding what you're getting into. There are situations like we talked about that a dual agency, or strike that, a off MLS listing might be appropriate. But you got to understand what you're getting into before you get into it. So you have to have a conversation with your agent, have a conversation with the broker if the agent doesn't seem to understand it. Talk to a real estate attorney. Do what you've got to do to figure out what the potential pitfalls are of going off MLS, and make sure that decision comes with that knowledge base before you get into one of these kind of transactions.
Now, in terms of the agent himself, a lot of agents say, oh, it's worth the risk, or, they want to go down this road and try and sell it themselves on Craigslist or with a sign out front. What is the mechanism? What are levels of, I hate to use the word punishment, but they can get in trouble with the real estate board, they could get in trouble with the Bureau of Real Estate?
Right. Yeah, you face the risk of your seller suing you. They move out of town, and with the dearth of information out there now on the internet, I know I personally am always looking on the Redfins and the Zillows and seeing
Yeah.
what properties I almost bought were selling for, and
Yeah.
and the opportunities
Yeah.
I missed or blew
Yeah.
and all that. Everyone else is doing that too. So they move out of town and then they go online and they see the neighbor with the exact same property, sold theirs for $100,000 more a week later. They might come after the agent there. And absolutely, the seller can also bring a complaint with the BRE, the Bureau of Real Estate, and then there's potential licensing issues there, and you might get your license suspended, or in an extreme situation, you could lose your license altogether.
We have always heard from real estate attorneys that it's very stressful to be in a claim for a real estate agent or a seller.
The amount of time that you can save on the front end by making sure you inform your client and you document it is minimal compared to the amount of time that you're going to spend in a lawsuit. There's hours upon hours of responding to questions, pulling all the documents together, sitting in a deposition, going to mediations, going to trial. You could have fixed all that if you did a good job on the front end and really giving some good informed consent, have them sign the correct forms, go through the forms with them, read everything, document that in emails. That's a lot easier to do than get involved in a lawsuit or a BRE complaint.
Now, isn't it like a car accident? If one had 3 car accidents in 5 years, your insurance rate's going to go up. Is
The
it the same
insurance
thing?
rates can skyrocket with a claim or two, absolutely.
Okay.
The E&O policies can really take a hit with one claim, and all it takes is one upset client to get a claim.
Okay. So an E&O policy for a realtor, what does that mean?
Sure, so that's an errors and omissions policy. So that's the policy that the brokerage will typically have in case of some sort of claim brought against the agent in a civil lawsuit.
Yeah. So I know a lot of agents, I've heard one agent, it was questionable activity years ago, and I said, boy, I don't think you could do that. And he said, well, they're not going to sue me, they're going to sue my broker. Well, that's not always the case. By the way, he turned out to be a broker with
Sure.
multiple offices. But even if they just don't go after the broker, they go after the agent and the broker.
Right.
And then the agent pays for the deductible. And
That's going to depend on interbroker
I see, okay.
arrangements and all
Okay.
that, but that is a possibility. And certainly, if the agent's involved, the broker's involved, and almost in every situation, vice versa as well.
Jim, you recently went to a conference back with 20 other major MLSs?
Right. We have a group of us called Cove, and we had a conference recently, and we commissioned a study to be done on off-market transaction activity in different markets around the country, and found that it's pretty common around the country.
Now, but that reminds me, Simon, there was a private group of agents, and you work in some high-end properties, areas and counties and around the Bay Area, but in some of those high-end communities, there was a group of agents that had their own little off-MLS, right? And I understand one of them recently disbanded.
They did, yeah.
Okay, so that's a problematic too, I think, if you are just working with your friends on off-MLS and selling to your friends' buyers. That could be a problem too.
Yeah, it's the same issue. If you're not exposing it to the full market, that's the risk you're taking. So ultimately, it's up to the seller to make those decisions, and whether the seller is informed and understands that is the key issue here. Does the seller really understand this property is only being exposed to 10 agents as opposed to 15,000 or 100,000? And if they're okay with that, again, that's their decision, but they've got to make sure they understand that before they agree to one of those kind of special listings or keeping it within one agent's office only and all that.
Jim, what about the MLS compliance? You have a complaint department, right? How
We
does
do.
that
We
work?
have 4 full-time people in compliance, plus we have a lot of automated scripts that look for mistakes on listings, and we take those mistakes and we treat our customers like they don't make mistakes on purpose, and we give them notice and ask them to clean them up. But there is one kind of automatic fine, and that is if you're promoting your property off the MLS in a coming soon status and you don't have an exclusion form signed, that's an automatic $500 fine. That
Okay.
doubles every time you're caught for that.
Perfect.
And our phones ring. We probably get 500 agents turned in a month on
Wonderful.
on not. Now most of them have excluded their properties, but
Okay.
but it's common practice that you see a sign, you call the MLS and just say, hey, I just saw this property coming soon. You might want to check, see if you have an exclusion on it.
So that's, of course, we're talking about they're driving down the street. There's a signpost out front that says coming soon.
Right.
Okay. So we have a large real estate community that watches this show, so we should encourage them to drop a dime if they know what that term means.
Well, so they do that because if it's not in the MLS, it hurts everybody's chance to have an opportunity to sell that property. They might have a client for that property. And so it hurts everybody to see those properties marketed outside of the MLS.
Yeah, so we're wrapping up the show here, but you do now have a coming soon category.
We do have a coming soon category. It's a result of the research we did with our customers on understanding that practice, that off-MLS market practice. And there's things that were legitimate concerns. They might not be ready to sell yet, but they have a contract, but they don't want to advertise a picture of it yet because it's not ready to show. They don't want the days on market counting starting yet. They don't want it on the internet yet. And so our coming soon status, properties can be in that status for 30 days. You don't have to put a picture up on it, and it doesn't go to the internet. It doesn't go into the MLS search platform. It stays private, but other subscribers to our service can see it in that area.
Wonderful. Jim Harrison, thanks for coming out today.
You're welcome.
Simon Offord, thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Thanks again for watching Kapowich on Real Estate. This is a program dedicated to consumer protection within the residential real estate arena. We will see you next week. Thanks for watching.